a hunch, Simon contacted 10 scholars who over the years have worked on the Turin Shroud. There were many questions he wanted to ask, but one held the key for him. How tall was the man in the Turin Shroud? The first reply dropped into his email box in just an hour. In reply to your inquiry, the height of the man in the Turin Shroud is 5 feet 11 inches. A tall man, then, would fit into the hurriedly altered tomb. The extra inches would accommodate Jesus rather than the 5 feet 8 of Joseph of Arimathea. This was most exciting news for Simon. That night, he could not sleep as he waited for the other replies to drop in. All were of the same opinion. One reply was from Barry Schwartz, an American who had been the official photographer of the Shroud of Turin research project. In 1978, this was the first scientific attempt to prove the shroud's authenticity. Barry confirmed the team's findings. The Shroud of Turin is almost certainly the most tangible relic of Jesus' life and death.
Obviously, the most important thing on the Shroud of Turin is the image of a man, front and back, ventral and dorsal, that appears along the full length of the cloth, with the ventral and dorsal images head to head with an appropriate space between them for the cloth to have been wrapped the way it was. Of course, the most important thing that we see, if we look at the ventral image, front image, is the man himself. And as he stands there, you can see his arms crossed before him. You can see his shoulders, although they were damaged in the fire of 1532 and there are holes and patches there now. You can then look down the body, see the crossed hands. You can then see the legs, the knees, the thighs, the calves, and even the feet on the ventral image. Now, when you look at the shroud a little closer, you'll also see a number of stains, the most important of which, if you look directly near his heart, is the darkest blood stain, which we call the spear wound blood stain, that appears on the shroud. And interestingly enough, although you can't see it with the naked eye, when you photograph this area with UV fluorescence photography, you see a large serum stain, invisible to normal lighting, but visible there on the shroud with UV fluorescence photography. Now, as you come down the shroud and look again at the hands, you'll see blood stains near the wrists of the man of the shroud. Now, this would be the crucifixion wound from where the hands were nailed to the cross, and unlike all medieval and Renaissance art, which always depicts the nailing of the hands through the palms themselves, this shows an exit wound further up the wrist and would have been the correct exit wound for the nailing through the wrists, because the Romans did this all the time and they knew very well where to nail the hands so they wouldn't come loose, and in the middle of the palm is not the place to do that, closer to the wrist. So unlike all medieval and Renaissance art, the shroud shows it forensically accurate in the wrist. Now, if you come down and look at the feet, you'll also see at the feet blood stains. Now, there's some argument as to whether both feet were individually nailed or whether one foot was nailed over the other. We cannot tell this from the blood stains on the shroud. So it is impossible for us to make that conclusion, draw that conclusion from the Shroud of Turin. Now, when you look at the back side of the man, the dorsal side of the man, there you see something really amazing. There are a lot of markings across the back. Now, if you look closely, you'll find these extend all the way down past the buttocks to the back of the legs. And even on the front or ventral view, you'll find many of these, because these are dumbbell-shaped markings, scourge wounds from a Roman flagrum. And a Roman flagrum had 3 thongs, leather usually, and at the end of each, a dumbbell-shaped lead or bone weight. And these are the marks that we see on the Shroud of Turin. We see dumbbell-shaped bruises, many of them that drew blood, actually broke the skin, and these cover the man's body, not just the back where they're predominant, but also many came around the front, because as the scourger moved a little closer, his whip would then wrap around the front of the body and leave markings on the front of the body as well. Now, if we look at the face of the man of the shroud, we see blood stains on the forehead. And if we go further, we see blood stains in the hair. And if you look at the dorsal or back view of the head, that shows the back of the head. You see many blood stains there as well. We have stains on the shroud, on the head, as if from a cap or crown of thorns. So once again, everything about the Shroud of Turin, all of the blood stains, all of these markings are accurate to the gospel account of what was done to Jesus when he was scourged, beaten. And if you look at the man's face, once again, I should mention, if you look at the face, look at the bruised cheekbones, one more swollen than the other, but both rather swollen. So this man had been beaten in the face, he had been scourged, he had been then crucified, and then he was speared in the side. And what we have here is an accurate depiction, forensically accurate, of a crucified man, exactly as the gospel accounts of Jesus.
And it conforms exactly to the shape and length of the burial space in the tomb in the garden.